Good afternoon and welcome to our Good Friday service. It's really great to see you today. My name is Sarah Guinness. I'm the priest in charge of the Parish of Brentford of St Paul's and St Faith's. We're thinking the service is going to be about an hour long, maybe a little more. It's going to involve a Bible reading, a poem or a monologue, 2 minutes of silence and then a song. And we're going to repeat that order about 6 times over the coming hour. I'd really like to thank all those who've recorded poems and monologues for us today. They are very moving to listen to, so make sure you've got a box of tissues nearby. Thank you Matthew and Sheila, Penny, Steve, Shell, and also a huge thank you to Joel, who has spent a long time editing them and putting them together for us this afternoon. I really hope that you'll be able to engage deeply in the service today and just have a fresh understanding and appreciation of what Jesus has done for us. We're going to close the service today with a kind of act of dedication, which is really just a form of liturgy, and that'll prepare us as we go out into the rest of our day. And then we'll meet again on Easter morning on Sunday at 11 o'clock. So shall we begin by praying together? On this day, God of all tears, you call us in the midst of our busy lives to look at the suffering and the death of the one who came to carry the pain of the world. Give us eyes to see your love this day. Gather us to your side, but we leave you to carry the cross alone. You came as love incarnate, but with hate and bitterness were the gifts we offered to you. You poured out your love so our emptiness might be filled. Give us ears to hear your pain this day. And on this day, would you pray for us, for we cannot find the words on our own. Amen. Our first Bible reading this afternoon is from Luke chapter 22, and the words will be on your screen. Let's begin together. Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. But he replied, Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. Jesus went out, as usual, to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. A little later, seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. And when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, This man was with him. But he denied it. Woman, I don't know him, he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, You're also one of them. Man, I am not, Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, Certainly this fellow is with them, for he is a Galilean. Peter replied, Man, I don't know what you're talking about. And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. We're going to have our first meditation.
Peter, a meditation. I don't want to be seen. I'm too ashamed of what I've done to go any nearer. Since I met Jesus, since he called me to him, since I began to follow him, I have seen him do so many wonderful things. His power amazed me. His words spoke to my heart. His compassion for people in need, all that was wonderful. But I spent so much time misunderstanding too. My enthusiasm and good intentions make me go over the top. I get it right and then I get it, oh, so wrong. I walk on the water, then fall in the sea. I recognize him as the Messiah and fail to recognize what that means. And now And now I have spectacularly failed him. And I cannot bear it that I have let him down. My friend, my master. No, I don't know him. I don't. And the sound of the cock crowing in his face as he looked at me, it hurt so much that I did this. Once I asked him how many times someone should forgive another who sins against them, and he said 77 times. Will he forgive me for this? Right when it counted the most, I failed. I was afraid, I admit, terribly afraid, but now my shame at what I have done far outweighs the fear I felt. Will he forgive me? It's too late. He's dying.
us with your fire, fill us with your power, that the world may glorify your name. Lord, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us.
Our second Bible reading. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them. Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king." The whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!" Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept on shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" For the third time he spoke to them, "Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore I'll have him punished and then release him." But with loud shouts they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, and the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. For our second poem.
It is Friday. It is Friday, and I stand at the foot of the cross. Nothing can be said, nothing can be done. Action is futile. I can hold the other's hands and weep, but I cannot be comforted. It is Friday, and I stand at the foot of the cross. The air is heavy, still, with waiting and longing, waiting for the inevitable, longing for the impossible. Can this cup pass from me? I look around me. All the colours are muted, dusty browns and greys, cold and metallic. Rolling black clouds cover the brilliant blue of the sky, as my soul is occluded by pain. All that remains is the red of the blood running down the weathered wood of the cross. It is Friday, and I stand at the foot of the cross. I reach out and touch the raised grain of the wood. It is rough against my fingertips. The pong of unwashed wool and bodies crowds my nose. I smell fear, pain, death. I taste it at the back of my throat. I hear the laboured breathing from the cross. Death is near. It is Friday, and I stand at the foot of the cross. Remember him. Remember him as the silver cord is severed, as the golden bowl is broken. Remember him as the pitcher is shattered at the spring and the wheel broken at the well. Remember him as the dust returns to the ground it came from, and his spirit returns to the God who gave it. It is Friday, and I stand at the foot of the cross.
Show me the way of the cross once again, denying myself for the love that I've gained. Everything's you now, and everything's changed. This time you had my whole life. You can have it all. Show me the way. Show me the way of the cross once again, denying myself for the love that I've gained. Everything's you now, and everything's changed. It's time you had my whole life. You can have it all. Yes, I resolve to give it all. Some things must die, and some things must live. Now what can I gain? But what can I give? If much is required, and much is received, then you can have my whole life. Jesus, have it all. I've given like a beggar, but lived like the rich, and crafted myself a more comfortable cross. What I am called to is deeper than this. It's time you had my whole life. You can have it all. Yes, I resolved to give it all. Some things must die, and some things must live. What can I gain? much is required and much is received, then you can have my whole life. Jesus, have it all. Yes, I resolve to give it all. Some things must die, and some things must live. Now what can I gain, but what can I give? If much is required, when much is received, then you can have my whole life. You can have it all.
Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he's God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which said, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." We now have our third monologue, The Thief on the Cross.
The thief on the cross. Keep your head down. That's always been the best policy as far as I'm concerned. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't overplay your hand. Be the quiet, faceless one in the background, the one no one notices for long enough to suspect them ever anything. If you're clever enough, you can get away with murder. And I was clever. I always have been. I was a clever kid, not that anyone cared or noticed me even then. Never knew who my dad was, and my mother was too busy keeping her men friends happy to remember to feed me half the time, let alone notice I was good at anything. That's how it started. The thieving, I mean. I was hungry and I was lonely, so I started hanging around in the market with my head down and my ears open, listening, waiting for my chance, waiting till I could hear a gang of them laughing and talking, waiting till I could sense their guards coming down, and then bingo! In my pocket, food, money, anything I could wrap my fingers around. There 1 minute, gone the next, just like me. It became a way of life. I was never hungry again, never short of anything, but never too flashy either. A lot of the time, I didn't even want the things I slipped in my pocket. I'd lose them again at the next rubbish tip. It wasn't the things that mattered in the end. It was knowing I'd won, knowing I'd got one over on them all. So smug, so pleased with themselves, with their chat and their laughter and their friendships. I've never had a friend in my life. Never wanted one either. Money's the only friend I ever needed, and she's never let me down. Until now. I suppose I just got too cocky in the end. Forgot my own best advice. Allowed my nose to start itching over that parapet that had shielded me so nicely from the world all these years. My face started to get recognised. Some clever so-and-so started putting two and two together, started watching me. So, of course, I was finished. They banged me up in a cell with some nutter from Judea who just ranted and raved all night, And this prophet guy they'd brought in for blasphemy. This is the Romans, right? Crucifying a Jew for blasphemy against the Jewish God. What's all that about? Apparently, though, this guy thought he was God. They brought him in with this mock crown stuck on his head. All the soldiers killing themselves, laughing. Heaven help us, I thought. Give me the ranting nutter from Judea any day. What a way to spend your last night alive, shut up like an animal for slaughter with this pair. I didn't sleep much, and neither did he. The prophet guy, I mean. They had him in and out all night, to Herod, to Pilate, all over the place. And yet he stayed so calm through it all, serene almost, sad but not frightened. I suppose you wouldn't be frightened if you believed you were God, would you? Just wait till you get up on that cross, mate, I thought to myself. Just wait till they're banging their nails into us. We'll hear you open your mouth then, won't we, eh? And we did. Father, he said, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. No cursing, no anger, no begging for mercy like the rest of us. He was showing them mercy. It did my head in. Even in the middle of all the pain and the shame and the agony, he was filling my brain. Even through the nausea as they swung us up in the air, I couldn't stop thinking about him. What was this gentle, gracious man doing here, with rubbish like us? The nutter guy starts having a go at him, and I just lost it. I started crying like a baby, crying like I can't remember ever crying in my life before. Leave him alone, I sobbed, leave him alone. We deserve this, but he's done nothing wrong. It was agony to move anything, but I had to look at him. I just had to look at him. And I wanted him to look at me. Jesus, I shouted, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he did look at me. His head turned slowly, and his eyes met mine. And he said, I'm telling you, today you're going to be with me in paradise. And then suddenly the pain stopped. All of it. And for the first time in my life, I held my head up.
until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything. Gifts, no man, no wisdom. But I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom.
It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he said this, he breathed his last. The centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness the sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. It's time for our next poem.
At the cross, I wait, and time ticks past. I gaze, made silent by the sight. I watch as soldiers meticulously move, executing each terrible, torturous task. I gasp. Still life lingers in his fragile, broken form. I flinch as blow by blow nails bite deep through flesh to find wood. I stand as he is lifted high, silhouetted 'gainst the sky which he has made. I weep as his cry echoes deep in my hardened, calloused heart. I wail as he screams, "It is complete, finished, final, said and done." I fall as the sky turns inky black, and the sun and moon and stars forget to shine. I kneel as worlds collide and time ticks by. What once bound no longer seems to hold. I bow, for part of me is gone, kept forever on Calvary's painful peak. I wait at the foot of the cross to begin my journey home.
A reading from Isaiah chapter 53. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. We're now going to listen to a slightly longer reading, and this is Our Sorrows, a meditation by the Reverend and the Bishop Stephen Cottrell.
He carried our sorrows. Nothing was too small for him. All the fragments were gathered up. And nothing was too large or too heavy. He carried the tiny, casual disappointments, the lost hopes and shattered dreams that reverberate through a lifetime. And he carried the huge, ravaging hurts, where tragedy bites and the tectonic plates of a lifetime shift. He carried the lives that are lost before they have hardly begun, the lives cut short and the lives that are savagely realigned by grief or injury or abuse. How can we list all this pain? How can we account for it? Only that we see it in his arms gathered together, carried. The pain of miscarriage, the lost potential of abortion, the confusion and indifference that cohere, the sudden, inexplicable tragedies of so-called accidents, the friendly fire, the severed limbs, the collateral damage and all the unspectacular horrors of war, the steady deterioration of the body, the unhurried affliction of dementia, the howls of grief cried out at the never-ending hours of death, the emptiness of the days that follow, the creak of the gate, the footsteps on the path, the heartbeat knocking on the door, the unopened telegram, the phone unanswered in the hall, the torn fragments scattered in the fire, the dying embers offering up their heat, separating and departing, the crumbled earth dropping from our fingers as we step back from the graveside, the backward gaze that overshadows the evening of every life, and the stabbing intrusion of regret. He cradled them. Each was handled with a patient gentleness and an understanding that only comes from one who has known sorrow himself. And gazing from the cross itself, he saw it. All the failure and all the pain bound up together, and how one often feeds upon the other, so that the abuse of one life begets the abuse of another, victim and abuser bound together in a terrible cycle of horror and pain. And he did not make excuses, nor pretend that all the knotted skeins of our lives could be unravelled, smoothed out, understood. He saw us for what we are, and he loved us. And his words, now unreservedly in his eyes, offered compassion, forgiveness. Not that you need to be forgiven for pain, but for all of us it is muddled together. He had the keys of the kingdom in one pierced hand, and the balm of healing in the other. And he brought us both of them, and he carried them. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was oppressed and he was afflicted. He carried our fears and he knew about fear. The sweat had poured from his body, and with it great drops of blood. He had been without food and drink. He had faced it down. He carried our sorrow, and he knew about sorrow. He wept at the grave of his dear friend Lazarus. When he beheld the city, Jerusalem, that had killed so many prophets and turned its back on God, he wept. He embraced the lost and lonely. He held the frightened in his arms. He slipped his hand into the hands of tiny children and he comforted them. He broke his bread with those who are excluded and rejected by the world. He crossed boundaries. He sat down in exclusion zones. He sought out the very ones the rest of us had hidden away. He felt the pain of difference and indifference, of nepotism and of prohibition. He overturned tables and he broke down barriers. He upended expectations. He was never what anyone wanted him to be. And so he carried his own sorrow, knowing that to please God meant the displeasure of everyone else, and then their contempt heaped upon him. For that was what they did now. All their rile, their rancour, their ridicule and their rage they poured upon him. They sought to devour him, to bury him, to destroy him. But even this naked perversity, he carried it. He saw the uncovered countenance of evil, and he wept with sorrow, cried out in forgiveness, embraced it, carried it, drew its sting into himself, and defeated it. He carried our doubts, and he knew about doubt. Knew it was a part of faith, the necessary reverse of the coin. He had wrestled in the garden. He had faced the seductions of evil, the beguiling comforts of an easier road. And hardly able to believe that he is carrying us, and torn apart by our limitations, he carries doubt, his and mine and yours. Carries the very doubt that looks at him, wonders whether he has anything save a certain charismatic madness, and turns away.
survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died. My riches gain I count but loss, and pour contempt on all. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. Although in things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to His blood. See from His head, His hands, His feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Did as a and sorrow meet, both thoughts composed, so rich and
Our final reading. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. We now have our last monologue, and we're hearing this time from Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Mary! Mary Magdalene! It's me! Mary! Will you let me in, love? I'll just sit here by the fire a minute and get warm. Oh, such an awful day. I knew after that you wouldn't be sleeping either. It feels like a knife has pierced my heart. When I saw you there today at the cross, I knew I had to come and see you. There's something I have to say to you, and there's something I must give you. Well, I never really liked you. Well, you know that, don't you? I thought you had designs on my boy, and you weren't exactly the type I had in mind for him. You must admit your reputation went before you. How wrong could I be? Will you forgive me? We need to be friends, especially now. Funny, isn't it, how the mind plays tricks in times of great pain? I can't see him hanging on that cross anymore.
All I can think about is that day when I held him in my arms for the first time. Oh, he were gorgeous. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? Every mother thinks their baby is. It wasn't the birth I'd planned. We'd to go to Bethlehem, where Joseph's folks came from, for a blooming census, miles away. I wanted my mother. I wanted my family. I wanted my own bed. But it wasn't to be. With such a lot of visitors, I've no idea where they all came from. Shepherds with their sheep that were barring and leaving their... Well, never mind, all over the place. And then, much later, strangers. There was no moon that night, just this one blazing star that seemed to hang in the heavens right above us, and it lit the whole night sky. They said it had led them to us, these strange folk with their fancy clothes and their funny accents. They stared at the baby as if they recognised him, as if they found something they'd been looking for all their lives. And then they gave him gifts. Oh, such gifts. Gold. Well, that came in very useful when we had to run for our lives to Egypt. Oh, I'm Magdalene. Even then, in all his innocence, there were them that wanted him dead. The sweetest smelling frankincense. We used that as an offering whenever we went up to the temple in Jerusalem for the pilgrim festivals. Jesus loved worshipping at the temple. He was such a funny little boy. I can never smell frankincense without thinking of the pleasure on his face. I didn't reckon much to the third gift, myrrh, with all its associations with death and burial. I wanted rid of it, but my wonderful wise Joseph, God rest his soul, he wouldn't let me. He said it wasn't mine and I must show respect. So when we got back to Nazareth, I wrapped it up and I stuffed it on the back of a shelf. Until tonight, I found it, wrapped in the clothes we swaddled him in. The finest myrrh, Mary, fit for the body of a high priest or even a king. I want you to take it for me, Mary, and when the Sabbath's over, will you go, give it to my son, the gift given him 33 years ago. Smooth his skin and tend his wounds. No, Mary, don't you cry too. You see, I think he'd like that. Use this myrrh to banish the pain that life brought him and make him fit for his death. I'll leave it here. It's late, love. I'll show myself out. Good night, Mary Magdalene. God bless you, love. God bless.
aside your majesty, gave up everything for me, suffered at the hands of those you had created. You took all my guilt and shame when you died and rose again. That today you reign in heaven and earth exalted. I really want to worship you, my Lord. You have won my heart and I am yours forever and ever. I will love you. You are the only one who died for me, gave your life to set me free. So I lift my voice to you in adoration. Laid aside your majesty, gave up everything for me, suffered at the hands of those you had created. You took all my guilt and shame when you died and rose again. Now today you reign in heaven and earth exalted. I really want to worship you, my Lord. You have won my heart and I am yours forever and ever. I will love you. You are the only one who died for me, gave your life to set me free. So I lift my voice to you in adoration.
I hope you've enjoyed the past hour together. We're going to finish with an act of dedication as we gather our thoughts and prepare to go into the rest of the day and also tomorrow. The words will be on the screen and your responses will be in yellow. And do join us on Easter Sunday live at 11 o'clock. See my servant, says the God of hope, wounded, scarred, and broken. Many shall see and be astonished, nations startled and shocked, their leaders staring and speechless. He was wounded to bring wholeness. Come, my servant, says the God of hope, wounded, scarred, and broken. Go into a world which is battered and bruised, its people hungry and without hope. Walk with my people and bring wholeness. God of hope, you sent Jesus, wounded, scarred, and broken, to walk with us. Would you send us now, your wounded, scarred, and broken church, to bring wholeness and hope? Amen.
praising and dancing and singing